Nvidia just gave a massive warning to the AI market. On today's episode, we're going to take a closer look at the GAIN AI Act and why companies like Nvidia are not in favor of something like this. So, in today's episode, we're going to understand what this act is, the overall timeline, and more importantly, how it can impact the overall AI space. So, let's take a closer look in today's episode.
I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for their subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
All right. So in the past few days, we've seen a lot of things impacting the AI market. I mean, we've seen Broadcom recently reported earnings. We're going to talk about the GAIN AI Act that is creating some form of momentum in the overall market as well. And that's why you need to make sure to be following all these updates closely, as this is a market that's always moving. It's always moving. And for that reason, you need to hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button. Now, first, let's kind of look at what NVIDIA made. So on September 5th of 2025, NVIDIA made the following statement about the GAIN AI Act. The US has always been and will continue to be our largest market. We will never deprive American customers in order to serve the rest of the world. In trying to solve a problem that does not exist, the proposed bill would restrict competition worldwide in any industry that uses mainstream computing chips. While it may have good intentions, this bill is just another variation of the AI diffusion rule and will have similar effects on American leadership and the US economy. So first, I kind of want to explain a little bit more of what this overall GAIN AI Act is. But we can see it seems NVIDIA focuses and kind of makes it seem like another AI diffusion law. The AI diffusion law was a law that was going to be in place. It was one of the last laws that kind of the Biden administration put in place and was going to go in effect in May of 2025, if I remember my dates correctly, and was going to create some friction for other entities to collect AI chips and kind of reduce the dependency, reduce the competition in the AI market. All right, so now we understand that NVIDIA is not excited about this GAIN AI Act. But what exactly is this GAIN AI Act? So the GAIN AI Act stands for the Guaranteeing Access of Innovation for National Artificial Intelligence Act of 2025, and is a proposed U.S. law attached to the 2026 National Defense Authorization Act. Its primary goal is to ensure U.S. domestics' needs for advanced AI technologies are met before those of foreign nations, particularly countries of concerns like China and Russia. So overall, the GAIN AI Act is a way to kind of make sure that U.S. customers get the chips first before anybody else. Now, the first thing is the America First principle. So, US lawmakers view high end AI chips as strategic assets, the jet engines driving future industry. The act seeks to prevent US companies and research labs from being outbid or back ordered behind foreign buyers for critical hardware. Every top tier chip, and the main thing is they believe that every top tier chip sent abroad is viewed as one less available to fuel American innovation and national security. So if you're sending a chip somewhere outside of the United States, if it would have stayed in the United States, it would have helped with innovation and national security. Now, there are some nuances here, and this is very early innings. We're going to talk a little bit about the timeline here and how during this timeline so much can changes. But right now, there are key provisions and nuance. So right now, it mentions that it requires an export license for any shipments of advanced integrated circuits AI chips as well. And second, it imposes a U.S. first policy certification for exports to countries of concerns. So if you are shipping anywhere around the world outside of the United States, you're going to need some form of export license. So it's just more red tape for NVIDIA, which can obviously slow down a little bit the supply chain. The second thing is if the countries of concern are getting chips, the US, NVIDIA, and any of these companies that are sending AI chips need to show this priority certification that no US company has a backlog of chips, that all their fulfillments has been fulfilled. The important nuance is that the certified right of first refusal is tied to countries of concerns. However, the license requirement itself is global, potentially creating friction for allies in Europe, Japan, and Korea. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why this could be a downside for the AI market and for companies like Nvidia. So first, the people that can benefit: AI startups and small firms in the United States. This is the clearest benefactors here. The act can help level the playing field for GPU compute. It mandates US orders be filled first. So startups, small businesses, and university labs are no longer at the back of the queue. A small Silicon Valley company could get H100 Blackwell GPUs orders fulfilled without delays, and addresses a major bottleneck outside of big tech, potentially boosting the entire domestic AI ecosystem. Another big beneficiaries are big tech and cloud providers, US ones. Companies like Microsoft, Google Cloud, Amazon, and Meta benefit from a more secure supply chain. Domestic first allocations ensures they won't be edged out by surging foreign demand. US based cloud providers, like those mentioned, can improve capacity to serve enterprises' AI customers without export driven delays. And it kind of just brings US tech giants to be the first in line. Another benefactors are your AI researchers, US based, OpenAI, Anthropic. Private companies at the forefront of research and development get a more reliable hardware pipeline. So you have more GPUs to train more models, guaranteeing first access allows them to scale more smoothly. Release pressures on these firms to pursue costly custom chip development as a workaround for GPU scarcity, and empowers US innovators with the tools they need instead of seeing them diverted abroad. Now, it does seem like it's great news for a lot of US companies. Why would Nvidia hate something like this? And the main thing is the downside and the risk of the AI market becoming less competitive. For example, in AI innovation, if you're focusing on chip supply on US firms, could stifle the global AI innovation that fuels long-term demand for Nvidia. So a perfect example is slowing global competition. International AI labs will lag if they can't get chips quickly, shrinking the total market for high-end GPUs. Right now, a perfect example is Mistral AI. I believe they are based in France, yeah, versus OpenAI. So France, Mistral AI, a top global competitor, orders NVIDIA's next generation GPUs. But due to the GAME Act, their order is kind of put in the bottom of the queues behind US labs like OpenAI. Now, Mistral's next model is delayed by months, causing them to fall behind technologically and weakening a key global competitor. So obviously, it's good to have a US player dominate, right? You do win. But for a NVIDIA investor, customer concentration risk becomes a thing. The act empowers a few large USA labs, giving them significant pricing power over chip makers and more motivation to develop their own ASIC chips, right? OpenAI now becomes the only US based company that does well in the AI market. So now NVIDIA doesn't have all these other AI companies to provide GPUs. Now OpenAI has all the pricing power and they can say, you know what? We're the only ones developing in this space. We're actually going to develop our own ASIC solution. So for NVIDIA, reducing the amount of competition is bad. So obviously, if you start to see a downfall of non-US AI labs, it could create the competition to get smaller and smaller. Now, one may say that this act could push those companies to come to the United States instead, and then you just have US continue to lead in that space, which is very much true, right? So there's puts and takes here. Another example is kind of the cloud server provider, right? We mentioned that it prioritizes US orders and could consolidate the cloud market, which is counter to NVIDIA's strategy of a diverse customer base. For example, non US cloud providers would be at a significant performance and ROI, return on investment disadvantage. A perfect example is AWS, Google Cloud, or Microsoft Azure get first access of the newest AI accelerators and deploy them in European data centers. Now, a competitor like OVH Cloud must wait, or companies like Nebius, right? They're gonna have to wait before these other players get all the chips that they need. Now, what ends up happening is that US giant gets to capture the high margin European AI market and consolidating their power and reducing NVIDIA's customer diversity, right? NVIDIA wants to make sure there's a lot of cloud service providers so it's not dependent on one customer. But if US based companies get all the chips first, you're going to reduce it to a handful of companies, and then those become the major players as well. So, with fewer, more powerful customers who are also developing their own chips like the AWS Trainium, NVIDIA's long term negotiation leverage is reduced, right? So, what NVIDIA wants is they want the Nebius out there, they want the other neo clouds to be able to build their own AI chips. And that's why when NVIDIA sends out chips, it sends a little bit to Microsoft, a little bit to Google, a little bit to CoreWeave, a little bit to Nebius, a little bit to Iron, a little bit to this neo cloud in France, a little bit to this neo cloud in UK, a little bit to this neo cloud in Germany, so they can all build around the same time and they all have that competitive player. But if you're only sending it to one side of the world and to certain customers, those other customers are going to fall over because if they get their chips later, the customers margins are going to be slower. The way you have the best margins is if you have the chips on as quickly as possible and as first as possible. And you diversify it, you're able to have a great margin all around. But if you're concentrating on your AI chips, you're pretty much flooding the market with a few customers. Those customers are going to eat up the other players. And at the end of the day, for NVIDIA, that is really bad news because those other players are also developing their own AI chips. So for me, I'm not saying this is bad news for Nebius because it's still not a law. And I'll talk a little bit about the timeline, but a potential player that could be a downfall from here would be Nebius. A potential winner could be CoreWeave. CoreWeave, since it is a US based company, it will get all these AI chips before any of these neo clouds out there. So something to keep in mind of depending on the investments. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the timeline, right? And if you are enjoying, if you made it this far throughout this episode, make sure to hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button. I'm trying to hit 85,000 subs by the end of the year. We're a little bit less than 9,000 away. Let's see if we can do it. Now, right now we are in the Senate floor, and that's going to go between now to mid-September. Now we have to see if this gain amendment gets a standalone vote. Is it absorbed into the main bill or is it dropped? Depending on what happens, then we move into mid to late September. If the House adopts different or no chip language, its survival would then depend on conference negotiations. Then the conference committee happens in somewhere between October and November. And throughout all this, there could be so much changing in the language itself. It could be so much changes with everything in general. The whole Gain AI Act could be completely different by then. But then the conference committee in October to November, does it survive? In what forms? Provisions are often watered down or removed here. And then final passage and enactment happens in December. NDAAs are typically cleared in December. Once signed by the president, it becomes laws. Implementation will be obviously after that, depending on the time. So there's still a lot of time, but it is something that we're going to keep a closer eye on. We're going to have to make sure that the text is changing. How can it impact various companies? But at least for now, there is still a lot of time, at least 4 months before we get to the final update. And in that time, you have to make sure to stay tuned to this channel to see what changes, what companies can benefit. At the moment, if you are a US based company, you can benefit dramatically. Like I mentioned, CoreWeave will most likely get a lot more AI chips if this goes through than any other neoclouds outside of the United States. It could potentially be a bearish case for companies like Nebius, as they are not a US based company. And then I talk a little bit of why NVIDIA hates it, right? That they don't want the competition. They want this to be always a competitive market because if it is a competitive market, you have a lot of customers. Even though it is already a customer concentration, you don't want that customer concentration to get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And something like this would only benefit the handful of cloud service providers in the United States and the handful of AI labs here in the United States. So I hope you guys learned a lot. Take care, have a good day, and see you all next time.